let's talk about comments. What is the purpose of a comment?
Explain code that you can't explain by the code itself.
To explain the code that you can't use the code to explain. The purpose of a comment is to explain the purpose of code if the code can't explain its own purpose. Can code explain itself? Well, generally it can. Now, by the way, it did not used to be the case. Fortran could not explain itself. There was no hope. One of the problems with Fortran is that, does anybody remember the length of a name? The maximum length of a name in Fortran? 6 characters. Right? You could have a name, 6 characters long, that was it. And in fact, most languages in the early days had a limit very much like that. I once worked on an assembler that had a limit of 4. You can't get a lot done with 4. Basic, the original Basic, 1 letter, 1 number. That was it. A1, B2, K5. Those were your choices. So it's very difficult to get any kind of explanation done when you've got limits like that. Today's languages are remarkably rich. We can have names that are very long. We've got structure in these languages, classes and variables and methods and namespaces. So we've got all these tools that we can use to write code that explains itself. I found this code on the internet. I don't know if it's real. I have seen enough like it to know that it could be real. This is bad, really bad. It's really, really bad hack if you're an employee of Intertrode Communication. Then I'm really, really sorry that you have to maintain this. I was honestly planning on removing this tomorrow, but I've been known to forget things like this. It happens. No, it doesn't. Not if you are a professional software developer, it doesn't happen. You don't put an excuse like this in the code. Now, he might have done something stupid here. I'm not worried about the stupid thing he did. He was in the middle of a production crisis, and he had a whole bunch of pressures on him, so he did something dumb. That was okay. The problem I have is that he wrote this comment and made an excuse for what he did and checked it in. And you just don't do that. Do not check stuff like that in. So here's the thing. I can't seem to figure out why the account ID variable isn't set, and I've looked and looked, but I got to leave now. Well, okay, he had to leave. Okay. So anyway, I found that I can just grab the account ID from the debugging logs. I suppose that to fix it, you'd have to locate where it's clearing out the ID. Again, I'm sorry. Okay, so the problem I have with this comment is that it was irresponsibly checked into the production source code control system. I have no real objection to what he did to fix the problem in an immediate emergency. That's fine. But he should never have checked that in. He should never have made this excuse, whoever that person was, and then excuses the fact that he's not going to fix it later. That's a problem. So, I want to talk about comments, and I use that as a preface, but let's talk about the right and the wrong reasons to do comments. Nothing can be quite so helpful as a good comment. I say that up front because most of what I'm going to be doing is ranting about comments. So I want to make it very clear up front that not all comments are bad. Some comments are great. On the other hand, nothing can be quite so obscuring as a bad comment. Comments are not pure good. Many of us were taught that comments were pure good. We were taught in school, or we were taught by early books, that everything should be commented. A programmer should comment everything. Comment, comment, comment. We got to the point that we measured the quality of the code by counting the comments. This led to absurd kinds of comments like I++, / increment I. The proper use of a comment is to compensate for our failure to express ourselves in code. To the extent that we can express ourselves in code, we do not need comments. But we cannot perfectly express ourselves in code, and so in those cases, we need comments. Every use of a comment represents a failure to express yourself well in code. This is how I want you to look at comments. Comments are not the kind of thing that you pat yourself on the back for and say, oh, good, I was a good programmer, I wrote comments. Every comment you write is a failure. Now, you will fail. You will fail to express yourself. You will have to write comments, but you should look at every comment as an unfortunate necessity, not a great achievement. Why? Well, one of the reasons is that comments lie. Now, nobody intentionally writes, well, I guess some people do, but most people don't intentionally write comments that lie, but comments degrade over time. Let me ask you this. What color does your IDE paint your comments in? Green, like the grass. Oh, gray. Gray's even better. Soft gray, ignore me gray, I can't hurt you gray, I don't bother you gray, I'm just part of the background gray. We paint our comments in colors that are easy to ignore because we don't want to see them. We want to look at the code. We don't want to read the comments. Comments get in the way, so we make them fade into the background. Now, I changed my IDE, and I have my IDE paint comments in bright red, big, staring, glaring red, because I figure that if someone wrote the comment, I probably ought to read it. And then if I read the comment and I think it's useless, I will delete it. And that helps me get rid of a lot of comments. Comments silently rot because no one maintains them. We paint them in a color we can barely see, so of course we don't maintain them. And no one reads the comments when they're into the code. They're fiddling around in the code and they're changing stuff around in the code. They don't read the comment that's up here. And so eventually the comment starts to say things that have nothing to do with the actual code. Has anybody seen code? Anybody seen comments that tell you to do exactly the wrong thing? You know, they're 5 years old. And they tell you, okay, this is what you've got to do. And you read the code, you say, well, if I did that, it would crash. Right? But do we delete those comments? Do we fix those comments, or do we leave them there? Because they're there for posterity. Has anybody seen a comment that is broken loose from the main body of comments and migrated down into the guts of the code, probably through copy-paste operations, where it hangs out there like a piece of junk DNA, just a fragment of a comment hanging out there serving no purpose whatever, but no one will delete it? Comments don't make up for bad code. Now here's what happens. You write a bunch of code, and you look at the code after you're done with it and think, oh, this is awful. And then you start to write a comment. I better comment it because this is really bad code. I better comment it. No, you should clean it. Don't comment the code. Clean the code. Make the code express your intent. Put the effort into the code. Don't put the effort into the comment. If you finally fail at cleaning the code, then write the comment. Most of the time, however, you will find a way to make the code express itself. Explain yourself in code, not with comments. So here's an example. The top says, check to see if the employee is eligible for full benefits. And then below that, there's this horrible Boolean expression. Well, wouldn't it be nice if there were a function called is eligible for full benefits? And then you could say if employee.is eligible for full benefits. That reads a heck of a lot better than that comment up there. So much better to use the names of functions and variables to explain the code than it is to use a comment to explain the code. Now I'm going to walk through a set of comments that I think are, I use the word good here on the screen, but that's not quite right. These comments are acceptable, maybe. I would leave them. I would not delete them. And I'm going to walk through those, and then I'll walk through a batch of bad comments. Copyrights. Well, okay, I don't know what you do in the Netherlands, but in the United States, you've got to do this if you want to protect your code, and you have to have this kind of weird punctuation, so fine. We will leave the boilerplate code up there. Here's a comment. It's an informative comment, and it's really an interesting one. It says, returns an instance of the responder being tested. And then the function here is responder instance. Now, you could ask this question: why didn't he call this responder being tested? Why didn't he name it better? Why did he have to have this comment there? And the answer is that he's using a design pattern. There are folks out there nowadays who are saying design patterns were so 1995 and now things are so much more modern and our languages nowadays don't need patterns. It's complete nonsense. Don't fall for that silly trick. Right? The design patterns are good things to know and good things to have in your head. What happened here is that this guy is using the singleton pattern. The singleton pattern canonical form has the function using this naming pattern, responder instance. So he could not name it a better name, and therefore he used a comment to back himself up. And that was fine. That's a comment that I would leave there. The pattern forced him to use this name, so he could not use a better name. Fine, he can use the comment. Below that, we see another kind of informative comment, which is to tell us what this regular expression matches. Now, regular expressions are hideous, horrible syntaxes that no one understands. It looks like gobbledygook, right? You look at a regular expression and your eyes kind of go, whoa. So it's a really good idea to have a comment telling you what the regular expression is matching. And clearly you can see that his attempt here is to match a timestamp. He's going to match hours, minutes, seconds, and then whatever the heck that is, month, day, year. That's probably the time zone, right? So, okay, that's fine. I'm glad he told me what he expected to match. But do you notice that the regular expression actually matches much more than just that? His comment is lying to me. The regular expression does not just match that timestamp. It matches lots more than that because of these stars. So it's a two-edged sword. He was informative, but he also was telling me a lie. Here's a comment that I would leave. And I love the phrasing, right? When programmers write comments, they use such interesting grammar. We are greater because we are the right type. I love this, right? This is the imperial we. We are not amused. So, okay, what he's trying to tell us here is that this is the compare to function in Java, and this is the canonical form of the compare to function in Java. And the first thing you check, of course, is that the incoming object is the right type. Okay, well, what do you return if it's the wrong type? And so what he said here is, look, if it's the wrong type, then I'm going to say that this object is greater than the incoming object. We are greater because we are the right type. Okay, fine. I could have probably phrased it better, but I at least understand the intent. I would leave that comment there. This is our best attempt to get a race condition by creating a large number of threads. Now, you can see what he's doing here. He's going to create 1,000 threads, and then he's going to hope to get a race condition. Now, apparently he's got some multi-threaded thing, and he's expecting some kind of race to happen. This is a terrible way to make a race condition, by the way. If you ever want to make a race condition, you don't do it this way, because this will just set up a nice little resonance amongst all the threads, and they won't race properly. So if you really want to test a race condition, you have to line up the threads right at the race point with some semaphores, and then release the semaphores and let the race continue. So he's using the wrong strategy, but at least he's telling me what he's going to do here. Now, he could have put this into a function named attempt race condition. That would have been better. So I'm questionable about this comment. I think he probably should have put it into a better named function. And then, of course, he should have learned how to actually create a race condition. I wrote this probably about 9 or 10 years ago now. And the comments over here were an attempt to deal with this horrible optical illusion. Code is rife with optical illusions. We line things up in code. There are repeated patterns in code, and they make your eyes twist and turn in strange ways. So it's very easy to create these bits of code that are virtually impossible to see just because of the optical illusion. So you look in here and you say, holy cow, they're all assert trues. At least there's no assert falses in there. And A's and AB's and BA's and B's and what the devil is going on? And so I tried to explain over here what the intent of these comparisons was. And it's successful. On the other hand, it's a double-edged sword because a reader is going to come along, a person's going to come along and try and read this code, and they will be drawn to the comments, and they will ignore the actual code. If those comments are wrong, they'll never see the real code. So that's a bit of a problem. I've struggled with this batch of code for many years trying to figure out a way to get it to be expressive. This is one of those examples where it's very hard to make this code express itself well. Now here the programmer is warning you, don't run that test until you've got some time to kill. And you can see why. He's, what is that, 10 million. He's going to write 10 million lines in a file. Well, that's going to take some time. And some of you may remember old JUnit. Before we had all those @ signs in JUnit, the way you turned off a test in JUnit was to put an underscore in front of the name of the test. And that would turn the test off. So what he's telling us here is that this is a disabled test, and if you turn it on, you can expect some pretty hefty delays. I would leave the comment in. It seems reasonable to me. This is a comment that I encourage. You sometimes wonder, what the age was of the people who wrote the Java library, and were they kindergarten programmers or something? Because sometimes the Java library is full of code that is very questionable. This is one of those cases. Simple date format is not thread safe. They've got static variables in simple date format, and if you don't know this and you don't anticipate it, then you're going to get caught in some kind of a concurrent update problem. So I always encourage people to put that comment in and say, remember that simple date format is not thread safe. When I wrote this slide, probably 6 years ago, I thought to-do comments were a really good idea. Now, to-do comments were brand new in IntelliJ about 6 or 7 years ago. And I thought, it's so cool that you can put this to-do in there, and then you can push a little button on the IDE and get a whole list of all your to-do comments. That's just so cool. And now I realize that the word to-do means don't do. I finally understand that. And so now I see code that is just loaded with to-do comments everywhere. Nobody ever does them. And so nowadays I have a different rule for to-do comments. I will use to-do comments. I will put them in, but I will not check them in. To-do comments must either be done or deleted before I will check the code in. Because once you check it in, it turns into a don't do. So that's my new rule for to-do comments. I wrote this comment, probably 9 years ago. I was working on a system, and I needed to put this trim in. Now, trim is one of those functions that it occurs so often, people use it so often, and they use it for reasons that are ignorable. Because you just call trim on all kinds of things. If it comes in from the outside world, call trim on it. So I wanted to point out that this particular trim was actually really important. It was actually doing something semantic inside the algorithm. So I amplified that with a comment. I didn't want people to just ignore the trim. Okay, bad comments. The programmer here was talking to himself. Notice where this comment is sitting. It's in the catch block that does nothing. Now that's weird all by itself. Notice what the code is doing, right? He's got some file that he opens up. It's a properties file. And then he's going to load the properties from that file. And then there's this IO exception that he catches. And he says, no properties files means all defaults are loaded. Where are all the defaults loaded? How do I know that's true? He says it here, he asserts it. All the defaults are going to be loaded here. I don't know that's true. I don't see the code that loads all the defaults. He's talking about some code somewhere else. And here it is, he's talking about some code that's in some different place. I don't know if that code is still there. I don't know if this is true or not. This helps me not at all. I understand why he did what he did. He's assuming that all the defaults are going to be loaded, but I don't know that that's actually taking place. So I look at this and think, well, this guy was just talking to himself. He was justifying why he was catching the exception and then simply ignoring it. What he probably should have done here is load the defaults. If he'd loaded the defaults here, then we wouldn't have to have the comment. It would be very clear what was going on, but he did this instead. Now here's a comment that is harder to read than the code. Utility method that returns when this dot closed is true throws an exception if the timeout is reached. Okay, now first of all, it's wrong. It describes the way this function works, but it describes it incorrectly because there are ways to return from this function that it doesn't talk about. And second of all, it's easier to read the code. While we're not closed and the timeout's greater than 0, then wait 100 and decrement the timeout. That's pretty simple to read. So I think the comment is not only useless, it's worse than useless. This kind of stuff makes me nuts. What motivated this guy to put a comment in front of every single variable? Not only that, they're Java docs. These are Java docs. And look at them. The child containers belonging to this container keyed by name. Now, first of all, the word container is a strange word, and he can't seem to make up his mind whether he wants to use container or component. So sometimes he uses component and sometimes container. He always capitalizes container. I don't know why. It's a very strange thing. The child containers belonging to this container keyed by name. Well, it's a hash map. Yeah, it's keyed by name. And what's the name of it? Children. Okay, it's a bunch of children keyed by name. I don't need the comment to tell me that. The processor delay for this component. Background processor delay. The variable name says more than the comment does. Lifecycle support event for this component. Lifecycle support. Container event listeners. Loader implementation. Loader. Logger implementation. Logger. All these comments are completely useless. I don't know why he put them in there. I believe he was motivated by some strange urge to comment everything because comments are good. I would much rather those comments be ripped out of there. Has anybody seen a coding standard that mandates comments? Thou shalt put comments on every function. Thou shalt put comments on every class. This is stupid. And you must find the people who wrote that coding standard and inform them that this is stupid. Because you don't want to ever mandate comments. When you mandate comments, you get stupid comments. That's when people will write the dumbest doggone things. So here, this is stupid. Now, what really gets me about this one is that this is a Java doc, right? And the purpose of Java doc is to run the Java doc tool to generate the HTML that creates the nice little web page for you, right? And if you take that comment out and run the Java doc tool, it will generate virtually the identical HTML. Because the Java doc tool is smart enough to look at the class and say, okay, title, author, tracks, duration in minutes. I would miss a couple of things, I guess. But almost no difference in the HTML, and somebody told me he had to put that kind of crap in there. Long, long ago, in the deep, dark past, when we did not have source code control systems, we would put the journal comments in the first part of the source file. This is something we all did. But nowadays, we have source code control systems. What source code control system are you using? Git. Yeah, see there? Git. Good. That's the right one. Okay, so nowadays, we can put all of our journal comments into Git. We don't have to put them into the beginning of the source file. So I hope nobody is doing this, and if you find any of that stuff in the source code, you could probably get rid of it now. What would happen if you deleted it? It would still be in Git. You're not going to delete it, right? You delete stuff out of a source file, it stays in Git. You don't have to worry about the fact that, oh God, I'm going to delete this stuff. Don't do this. Please don't do this. It is the dumbest thing to do. It's also insulting. I know that's a default constructor. I'm a Java programmer. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? Now this one's a little bit scary because you got that last one wrong. Right? Little copy paste going on here. I found this one in Tomcat, and I was fascinated by it because I still don't understand the comment. It's been years now, right? Does the module from the global list mod in angle brackets, I don't know why the angle brackets are there, depend on the subsystem we are part of? Now, I can't understand that comment. But I was able to use the IDE to extract out variables. So at the bottom, you see how I extracted out the variables. I extracted out module dependencies from smodule.getDepend subsystems. I extracted that out into a variable called module dependencies. The IDE told me what the type was. So that's cool, array list of module. Okay, cool. These are the modules, I guess, that we are part of, maybe? I don't know. And then I extracted out the other part, subsysmod.getSubsystem, and I called that our subsystem, and the IDE told me that was a module. And now look at the if statement. If module dependencies contains our subsystem. I love the way this reads. I don't know if it matches the intent of the comment, because I still can't understand the comment. Don't do this. It's stupid. You do not have to yell and then tell me that these are instance variables. Right? I know that they're instance variables. You don't have to do that. Sometimes it is important to yell in a comment. Right? Sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you are saying something that you really want to attract attention to, and then it is appropriate to put some kind of, big flag in there like this. But if you use that for instance variables, no one will ever pay any more attention to your big red flags. So this is like the little boy who called wolf. Don't do that stuff. It's pure clutter. Does anybody do that anymore? Comments on the closing braces? Remember, there was a time that our IDE, there was a time we didn't have IDEs. In the 80s when we were coding in VI with text files, how did you keep track of your closing braces? And this was one of the techniques. But it's probably not necessary anymore. This is graffiti. You do not have to tell me that you were here. The source code control system will remember. So if we need to know who to blame, we can find out. Of all the sins of comments, commented out code is the worst of them all. Is it an abomination before nature and nature's God? When I see commented out code, I don't read it, I don't try to understand it, I just delete it and get it out of the system. Commented out code is a horror. Now, people get very upset about that. You can't delete that code. Someone might need it one day. Well, if they need it, it's in the source code control system. So they can go back and look for it there. But I'm not going to tolerate it sitting in a module like this. Do I comment out code? Yes, while I'm doing experiments, but I will not check it in. I will not check in commented out code. Look at this. What does that mean? Header pos equals byte pos. First of all, is it code? It's got a semicolon after it, so that's a pretty good indication that it's code. Why is it there? Is there a variable called header pos? I don't know. Data pos equals byte pos. I don't know why that's there. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to get rid of it. This is somebody who wanted to write a really pretty Java doc. So we loaded it up with all kinds of HTML macros and crud like that, forgetting that the place you want the comments to be most readable is in the code. The fact that you've got a JavaDoc tool that scrapes out HTML and does a nice little print job for you is fine. You can use that tool, but the place you want the comments most readable is in the code. So you don't want to obscure your comments with a whole bunch of HTML and make them unreadable and force people to run the JavaDoc tool and then look at it on the web page. If you're going to write a comment, make sure it's readable in the code. For that reason, I don't tolerate HTML in my JavaDocs. No one can put HTML in a JavaDoc. You have to use some other mechanism to format it. So I will tolerate a pre and end pre as the HTML in the JavaDoc, which keeps all the fonts monospaced. Port on which fitness would run defaults to 8082. It does? Where do I see that 8082? Where here is this 8082? There's a fundamental rule about comments, right? You never talk about code that's somewhere else. If you write a comment, you only talk about the code that's right there. Because if you talk about code that's somewhere else, that code's going to change and your comment will turn into a lie. For the same reason, you never put where used lists in comments, because those where used lists will change like crazy as well. Here's somebody who simply did not want to write the code. They wanted to write about the code. So they wrote a whole little essay. I hope I drove the point home. Comments aren't bad, but I don't want you writing comments by default. I don't want you in the mindset of saying, I've got to write a whole bunch of comments now. If you're going to write a comment, you need a good reason to write a comment, because what you should be doing is making the code speak for itself to the greatest extent possible. And then if you fail at that, well, then maybe you'll have to write a comment.